In July of 2012, Mark Zuckerberg financed his $6 million Palo Alto home that's 3 miles away from Facebook's headquarters with a 30-year mortgage. At that time, he was 28 years old and the world's 40th wealthiest person, worth an estimated amount of $15.6 billion. The question is, why would you get into debt when you have billions of dollars and can easily afford it? If he wanted, he could easily buy a dozen $6 million homes in cash without batting an eye. So why get a mortgage? The answer is long and complicated, but in short, it's free money. Sounds ridiculous. Who would give you free money when you are already a billionaire? Let me explain. It all has to do with interest rates. The inflation rate in the US is 2.5 to 3%. So any money you borrow that's below the inflation rate is considered free money. Zuckerberg's mortgage rate is just a little over 1%, but it's adjustable, meaning that based on the circumstances, the rate could possibly go up for one reason or another. If you do the math, the bank is losing money since the mortgage rate is below the inflation. You don't have to be a genius to do the math. For the sake of example, let's say you borrow $1 million at a rate of 1%. The average rate of return on the savings account is 2.4%, meaning that if you deposit that $1 million in another bank, you end up making $24,000 a year, while you only have to make a monthly payment of $10,500 to the bank that lent you that money. Imagine if you can do that with $100 million, or how about $1 billion? When you can borrow money for free, there is no point in tying up your own money when you can use that money for more profitable things. Of course, when you are talking about small amounts of money, this might not make sense because the difference isn't that big. However, when it comes to large sums, playing around with 1, 2, or even 0.5% could potentially mean dozens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds. Let's say you are a businessman and you can easily afford $1 million house. Why buy a house when you can finance it for 1 or 2%, while you invest the rest of that money in your business that could potentially get you 10, 20, if not 30% returns? Even if you're lazy to find a more profitable way to use money, just throwing it all into an index fund can be much more profitable, especially when we are talking about 20 or 30 years. Historically, an index fund has shown to have an average rate of return of 8%. If you take a mortgage and invest your money in an index fund, the percentage difference will end up in your pocket. It all comes down to opportunity cost. Economically, it wouldn't make sense for Zuckerberg to buy the house in cash when he has been offered a 1% mortgage rate. But he is not the only one who is so smart to do that. Take Elon Musk, for example. Most of his wealth is tied to Tesla and SpaceX. To buy a house for $20 million, he probably might need to sell a considerable chunk of his wealth, pay taxes, and incur other expenses. However, he can take free money and keep his monthly payment under his budget. He took out a $61 million mortgage for 5 properties in California with a monthly payment of $180,000. That's not unique to billionaires, by the way. It's also practiced by moderately rich people like Jay-Z or Beyoncé. They took a mortgage to buy their $88 million house. They put 40% down payment and financed the other $52.8 million. That leaves the couple with $150,000 of monthly payments. In comparison, the national median home value is around $200,000. Instead of tying up $53 million in a house, he definitely knows where to invest it to maximize his profit. At the end of the day, he has made a lot of great investments and he's on his way to becoming a billionaire. The richer you get, the better ways you find to make more money. But let's be honest, not everyone gets such a low mortgage rate. Nationwide, it's around 3%. But even at that rate, it still doesn't make sense to purchase a house if you can finance it. However, wait a second, let's make this clear. Why do the super rich get a lower rate in the first place than the rest of the country? First of all, when you are a billionaire, The bank can sleep calmly because no one is worried that you might default on your loan, and in case if something happens, you can easily sell part of your business to pay back your mortgage. That takes out the risk out of the equation. Now compare that to an average employee who could get sick and not be able to work or just lose his job for one reason or another. Secondly, paying your mortgage on time every month helps you build and maintain a healthy credit score. So when you're in trouble next time, with a strong credit score, it will be much easier to borrow money from the banks. You're basically building trust between you and the financial institutions. But it also could be the other way around. Banks do offer such a low mortgage rate to establish a strong relationship with rich people so that when their companies would need a loan from a bank, they would come to them and not their competitors. It's a win-win situation. But these low mortgage rates are adjustable, which means, as I said earlier, they could go up. But no one is worried because if it stops making sense economically to these ultra-rich people, they can easily pay back their mortgage. But most people associate that with something negative because we usually borrow money that we can't afford for entertainments and end up paying a lot more back. In fact, right after getting out of college, you realize what a burden your student debt is already. And once you calculate how many years you have to pay back that debt, you immediately create a perception that debt is bad, especially when you can't even default on it. Playing around with debt is not easy. You are eventually taking a huge risk, and a small miscalculation can lead to disastrous consequences. That can ruin your life, make you homeless, and cripple your family if you're reckless. But it also can make you unbelievably rich if you know how to use it, because it's leverage. Leverage is a superpower that can make you rich instantly. Let's say, for the sake of example, you buy this house for $10,000. Go to the market and sell it for $11,000. Congrats, you just made a profit of $1,000. However, that's not much. But if you use leverage, you go to the bank first, borrow $990,000. With your additional $10,000, that's going to be $1 million. You head to your supplier and buy 100 phones now for $1 million. Turn around and sell it to the market for $1.1 million. But you still owe the bank, so you go back to the bank again and return them $990,000 that you borrowed earlier, and another $10,000 in interest. Now you're left with $100,000. After you deduct your own $10,000, you're left with $90,000 of pure profit. That's how you make money when you don't have money. The bank made their share of the profit, and you made yours. Of course, when you take this formula to the extreme and it's not regulated by the governments and practiced by everyone in the Wall Street, it turns into a financial crisis, as it happened in 2008. Remember when home prices crashed and then they took down the entire economy with them? Well, it's because the investment banks used leverage to maximize their profit to the point where their strategy backfired. Because they began giving mortgages to people who didn't necessarily have the best credit score and weren't financially prepared to make the monthly payments. And then they defaulted on their mortgages, as they suppose. It was a nightmare for the investors, because for the last 40 years, home prices were rising and suddenly they are going down. Well, we're not going to get into the details of the 2008 financial crisis, that's a story for another video, but in any ways, it's a major tool of how rich people make money. Of course, it's risky and you can end up losing everything, but if you know what you're doing, you